All right, today we're jumping into one of the most intense and honestly morally complicated family stories you'll ever hear. We're talking about a tale of betrayal, destiny, and a single blessing that would literally shape the future of a nation.
And right at the heart of this whole thing is a really tough question we're going to try to unpack. Is it possible for an act of pure deception to somehow be the very thing that delivers a divine, unbreakable promise? It's a dilemma that kind of messes with everything you think you know about right, wrong, and maybe even fate.
Okay, so before we can even get into the shocking parts, we have to understand the stakes here. This wasn't just some family squabble. This was about a legacy that had, you could say, cosmic significance.
So, picture this. You've got the patriarch, Isaac. He's old, his eyesight is pretty much gone, and he knows the clock is ticking. He's feeling this immense pressure to do one last crucial thing: pass down the sacred blessing he got from his own father, Abraham. This is it. This is his final, most important act.
And this is what it's all about. This blessing wasn't just a father wishing his son well, good luck out there. No way. The covenantal blessing was seen as a binding, almost legal, transfer of a divine promise. Once you gave it, that was it. No takebacks. It decided who would lead, who would prosper, and whose family line would carry on God's covenant. The entire destiny of a people was hanging on this one moment.
And here is where the whole thing just ignites. A private moment is overheard, and a mother decides, you know what, I'm going to take destiny into my own hands.
So Isaac calls for his firstborn, his favorite son Esau, who's this big, rugged hunter. And he makes a really simple request, something based on the senses. Go hunt, bring me that savory meat I love, cook it just right, and then I'll give you my blessing. The problem? His wife Rebecca is listening in from the shadows, and she has very different ideas.
So you have to ask, why would she do this? What's her endgame? Well, the sources give us two competing ideas. On the one hand, it's pretty clear she had a favorite. She just plain loved her younger son, Jacob, more. But on the other hand, some scholars say she was actually acting on a divine prophecy she received before the twins were even born, that the older brother would end up serving the younger. So, was she just a meddling mom playing favorites? Or was she a woman of faith trying to make sure God's will was done? The truth is, it was probably a messy combination of both.
And all of this builds to the super tense climax of the story as Rebecca's wild plan actually gets put into motion.
What's really interesting is that Jacob himself isn't exactly thrilled about this idea at first. He's scared. He knows how risky it is, and his first fear isn't even about whether it's right or wrong. It's about getting caught. He's worried his blind father will just reach out, touch him, realize he's a fraud, and give him a curse instead of a blessing. It really shows you his mindset.
But Rebecca is not backing down, and her plan is honestly kind of brilliant in its deviousness. It's a full-on sensory attack designed to fool a man who can only rely on his other senses. First, smell. Jacob has to wear Esau's clothes. Second, touch. She puts hairy goat skins on his smooth hands and neck to feel like his rugged brother. And third, taste. She whips up a meal that can pass for the wild game Esau was hunting.
And here it is, the critical moment. The whole plan almost completely collapses right here. Jacob goes in to see his father, and Isaac is immediately suspicious. He hears the voice and thinks, that sounds like Jacob, but then he reaches out and feels the hands, and they're hairy like Esau's. The deception is working, but just barely. You can just feel the tension in that sentence.
But in the end, the smell of the clothes and the feel of the hairy goatskins, it's just enough to push away Isaac's doubts. He eats the food, and then he does it. He pronounces the powerful, permanent, nation-defining blessing on Jacob. The point of no return has just been crossed.
So, the deed is done. But if you think the story's over, you're not even close. Now comes the immediate, devastating fallout from the lie. The timing is just brutal. Jacob literally walks out the door. And who walks in? Esau. He's back from his successful hunt. He proudly cooks the meal for his dad, and he has absolutely no idea what just went down. He comes in ready to claim his birthright, and instead walks straight into a scene of utter shock and betrayal.
And the moment of realization, it is just gut-wrenching. Isaac starts trembling uncontrollably when he figures it out, and Esau just lets out this great and exceeding bitter cry. His desperate plea, "Don't you have just one blessing left for me?" It shows you how devastated he is. He gets it. This isn't something his dad can just fix. The blessing is gone, stolen, and he's been left with absolutely nothing.
So yeah, Jacob may have gotten the blessing, but look at the price. The family is completely shattered. Esau is filled with this simmering, murderous rage. He vows to kill his brother the second their father dies. And Jacob, our winner, has to run for his life, forced into a long, lonely exile from his home.
Which brings us to the final, and maybe the most profound part of this whole story, trying to figure out how such a messy, flawed human act could somehow line up with a divine plan.
This table right here, it lays out the core paradox perfectly. Look at the left side. You've got all the human messiness, deceit, favoritism, fear, betrayal. It's ugly. But then look at the right side. Somehow, through all of that ugliness, the divine outcomes are achieved. The prophecy about the elders serving the younger, it comes true. The covenant promise, it continues. God's sovereign choice as it's presented, it's upheld.
So the big takeaway from the analysis seems to be that God's overarching plan doesn't get derailed by our human flaws and mistakes. His will gets done. But, and this is so important, that doesn't make the actions okay. The deception still had severe, painful, real-world consequences for every single person in this story, and it shaped the rest of their lives.
And so we end up right back where we started, with this huge question that just hangs in the air long after you've heard the story. If the final destination was somehow meant to be, does the deeply flawed, deceptive, and painful road they took to get there even matter? It's a huge question about fate and choice, and that messy place in between where they both collide.